the applause of a mother watching her son beat my daughter. My name is Elena Vance. I am 57 years old. I am a family law attorney specializing in domestic violence cases. I have spent 32 years defending women who could not defend themselves. I have faced corrupt judges, violent husbands, and entire families protecting the abuser. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my career prepared me to see my own daughter being beaten right in front of me. This is the story I never thought I would have to tell. The story of how a Sunday dinner destroyed a family and how a silence of 30 seconds changed the destiny of 4 people forever. Because you see, they did not know who they were messing with. Let me take you back to that night. It was Sunday, March 20th. I remember the exact date because it was the birthday of my late husband, Robert. He had died 2 years prior from a sudden heart attack, leaving me alone in that big house in the suburbs that used to be filled with laughter. Ariana, my only daughter, had insisted that I go to dinner at her house. "Mom, you cannot be alone on Dad's birthday. Come over, I will make his favorite dish." Pot roast. My daughter, my Ariana, 32 years old, a chemical engineer, a brilliant mind who had inherited her father's intelligence and my tenacity. Or so I thought. I arrived at 7 in the evening at her house in the hills, a beautiful residence they had bought just a year ago with the money Robert had left us. I had given her her full share of the inheritance against my accountant's advice. "Mrs. Vance, could you put it in a trust, just in case?" Just in case what I had asked him annoyed. Just in case my daughter married a man who turned out to be a monster, I should have listened to him. When I arrived, the table was already set. Fine china crystal glasses, scented candles. Ariana had been cooking for hours. I could smell it. The roast, the mashed potatoes, the homemade biscuits. The smell transported me immediately to our kitchen back home, to Robert tasting the gravy straight from the pot to Ariana, as a child stealing bites of carrots. But something was different. Ariana was different. Her hair was shorter than usual, almost to her shoulders. She was wearing a long-sleeved blouse despite the heat of March, and when she hugged me, I felt her tense up as if every muscle in her body was on high alert. "Honey, are you okay?" "Sure. Mom just tired from work." I should have insisted. I should have asked more. But her husband was there. Mark. Smiling with that smile I had always found too perfect, too rehearsed. "Mother-in-law, so good to see you. Come in, come in." And behind him, like a dark shadow, was his mother, Helen, 64 years old. A widow too, but a different kind of widow. Her husband had died 10 years ago in circumstances that were never entirely clear. An accident on the stairs of her house. A fatal fall. Investigation closed quickly. I, with my 3 decades of experience in family cases, had sensed something strange from the day I met her at the wedding. But Ariana was so in love, so happy, that I kept my suspicions to myself. Another mistake that haunts me every night. "Elena, dear, what a joy to have you here," said Helen, with that sugary voice she always used. Ariana prepared a delicious dinner. "My son is lucky to have such a dedicated wife." A dedicated wife. Those words as if Ariana were a servant who had to earn her place in that house, in the house she had paid for with her own inheritance. We sat at the table. Mark at the head, of course, Helen to his right, me opposite her, and Ariana. Ariana between her husband and her mother-in-law, like she was trapped between 2 walls. The dinner started quietly, too quietly. Helen talked and talked about her new decoration project, about her friends at the country club, about how wonderful it was to have her son so close now that he lived in the same neighborhood. I ate in silence, observing. I watched how Ariana served the food with trembling hands. I watched how Mark did not even say thank you. I watched how Helen subtly criticized every dish. "The gravy is a bit salty, do not you think, son? The biscuits are a little cold." In my day, wives got up earlier to have everything perfect. And I watched how my daughter, my brilliant, strong, independent daughter, shrank with every word. Then it happened. Ariana was pouring more water into Mark's glass when her hand shook just a little. Barely a drop fell on the white tablecloth. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark slowly placed his fork on the plate. The sound of metal against porcelain echoed like a gunshot at that table. Mark said, with a voice dangerously calm, "Do you see what you did?" My daughter opened her mouth to apologize, but he gave her no time. What happened next occurred in slow motion, but it was so fast I could barely process it. Mark got up from his chair and slapped my daughter. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound of his hand against Ariana's face filled the dining room. My daughter fell from her chair, hitting the marble floor. And then I heard the applause. Helen was clapping. "That is how she learns to behave," she said with a satisfied smile. "A clumsy wife needs correction. I also had to educate my husband this way. It is for her own good." My blood froze. For 30 seconds I could not move. I could not breathe. 32 years defending women victims of violence, and I could not react when it happened right in front of my eyes. But those 30 seconds were not paralysis. They were calculation. Because in my head, I started processing everything I was seeing with the coldness of a lawyer who had seen this hundreds of times. The power of control, the forced submission, the normalized violence, the complicit family, and something else. I saw the glass of water with the slight condensation ring on the table, the drop that had fallen, the way Mark had reacted disproportionately. This was not the first time. I stood up from my chair slowly without saying a word. Mark looked at me with that arrogant smile, waiting for me to scream, to make a scene, to get hysterical like him. Probably what he expected emotional women to do. But I did not scream. I took my phone out of my purse. My hands did not shake. Not once. And I dialed a number I had on speed dial for 20 years. "Commander Miller," I said with a voice so cold I surprised even myself. "This is Elena Vance. I need an immediate response unit at 345 Palm Avenue, apartment 802. Domestic violence in progress with witnesses." I'm going to activate the recording on my phone now. And I did. I activated the recorder. I put the phone on speakerphone on the table and looked directly into Mark's eyes. "Repeat what you just did," I said. "Repeat what your mother just said. Please." "I have all night." Mark's face changed color, from arrogant red to ghostly white in 3 seconds. You cannot." "I am a lawyer, specializing in gender violence for 32 years, I said with the same cold voice. "I have prosecuted 218 men like you. I have direct contact with the special prosecutor's office, and you just beat my daughter in front of me, in front of your mother, who applauded and justified your violence, making her a legal accomplice." I walked over to Ariana, who was on the floor, her face red and silent tears falling down her cheeks. I helped her up carefully, checking for any serious injuries. "Mom," she whispered. "Silence, my love. I am doing the talking now." Mark took a step toward me, but I held up a hand. "If you touch me, that is 3 more felonies. Threat, attempted aggression against a key witness, and obstruction of justice. Do you want to keep adding years?" Helen, for the first time all night, had stopped smiling. "This is a family matter," she said with a trembling voice. "You have no right to. I have every right in the world. I am a direct witness to a crime punishable by 3 to 6 years in prison. And you, madam, as an active accomplice who justified and celebrated the violence, can face up to 4 additional years." At that moment we heard the sirens. Half an hour. I had told them they would arrive in half an hour, but I had known Commander Miller for 2 decades. He knew that when I called it was serious. They had arrived in 17 minutes. 3 patrol cars parked in front of the building. 6 officers came up to the apartment. Commander Miller entered first with that imposing presence I had learned to respect in hundreds of cases. "Attorney Vance," he greeted me formally. Then he saw Ariana, with her face marked, still trembling. His expression hardened. "We have caught them in the act," I told him. 3 blows, direct witness, partial recording on my phone, and accomplice present. The commander nodded and looked at Mark. "Sir, you have the right to remain silent." What followed was pure protocol. Mark was arrested. Helen, too, as an accomplice. Both were handcuffed and taken to the patrol car. Before leaving, Mark looked at me with a hatred I will never forget. "This is not going to stay like this," he said. "My family has contacts. We are going to." "Your contacts are worth nothing when there is solid evidence and witnesses," I interrupted him. "And if you try to intimidate me or get near my daughter, I will personally ensure that every day of your sentence is spent in the prison furthest from this city." They took him away. And for the first time all night, I hugged my daughter. She cried in my arms for what seemed like an eternity. She cried out years of silence, of fear, of feeling trapped in a nightmare she did not know how to end. "Why did you not tell me?" I asked her when she could finally speak. "I was ashamed, Mom. You have always been so strong, always defending other women. How was I going to tell you that I was being a victim myself? How was I going to accept that I married a man who turned out to be exactly the kind of monster you fight?" I hugged her tighter. It ends today. And so it was. But this story does not end with the arrest. This story is just beginning. Because what Mark and Helen did not know was that the universe has a very particular way of serving justice. And I was going to make sure that every single one of their actions had its consequence. Sometimes we trust the wrong people too much. Have you also been disappointed by someone you loved? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to read them. Before I tell you what happened after that night, I need you to understand something important. I need you to know who Ariana was before Mark. Because when you see a woman destroyed by violence, it is easy to forget that she was once a girl who laughed without fear, that she was a teenager full of dreams, that she was a woman who walked through life with her head held high. Ariana was born on July 23rd, the middle of summer. Robert and I had been married barely 2 years when she arrived, filling our house with a cry that at that moment seemed like the most beautiful sound in the world. My husband was an architect, a nobleman, of the kind that are rare these days. He never raised his voice, he never raised his hand. When we had disagreements, we sat in the living room with coffee and talked until we found common ground. That is how we grew, and that is how Ariana grew. Our daughter was curious from a young age. I remember when she was just 4 years old, she took apart the house phone because she wanted to see how the voices spoke from inside. Robert laughed for half an hour when he found the pieces scattered all over the living room. "This girl is going to be a scientist," he told me while we picked up screws from the floor. And he was right. Ariana was always brilliant. Not just smart, but with that special spark of wanting to understand how everything worked. Plants, machines, chemical reactions, people. When she was 12, she won her first science fair with a project on water purification. I remember her face when they gave her first place, a mixture of pride and that genuine humility she never lost. "Mommy, do you think Dad is proud? Your father has always been proud of you, my love, from the day you were born." Robert was there in the audience with eyes shining with held-back tears. That night, the three of us went to dinner at Ariana's favorite restaurant, a small place downtown that made the best Swiss enchiladas in the whole district. To our scientist, toasted Robert, raising his glass of iced tea. To our family, I said. To being together added Ariana with that smile that lit up any room. Together. That word was like an anchor for us. We did not have much money in those years. Robert's career was just taking off and I was still building my reputation as a lawyer. But we had something more valuable. We had each other. Sundays were sacred in our house. Robert cooked roast. It was his specialty, a recipe he had inherited from his grandmother. He spent hours preparing the meat, mixing spices, adjusting the flavor of the gravy. Ariana and I were his official assistants. She measured the ingredients with scientific precision. I told the family stories my husband loved to hear. "Have I told you about the Mrs. Dominguez case?" I asked while chopping onions. "Mom, you have told us that case like 20 times, laughed Ariana. But this time I have new details. And so we spent the afternoons. Between laughter, simmering roast, and the smell of the biscuits Robert insisted on making by hand because store-bought ones do not taste the same. Those Sundays, how I miss those Sundays. Ariana grew up fast, too fast, like all children grow when you are not paying attention. Suddenly she was 15, then 18, then she was entering university. She studied chemical engineering at State University. She was top of her class, always. Not because she was an obsessive perfectionist, but because she genuinely loved what she did. She came home excited talking about exothermic reactions, about material balances, about industrial processes I could barely understand. "Mommy, did you know we can turn organic waste into clean energy?" It is fascinating. Robert and I listened to her mesmerized, proud to have a daughter so passionate about changing the world. When she graduated with honors at 24, Robert cried throughout the ceremony. He did not bother to hide the tears. He was too happy, too proud. "That is my daughter," he told anyone sitting nearby. "That is my Ariana." After graduation, we took a photo of the three of us together. That photograph is now framed in my living room, Ariana in the middle holding her degree, with Robert and me on each side hugging her, all smiling. We did not know that would be one of the last complete photos we would have as a family. Ariana got a job immediately at a major pharmaceutical company. She was a researcher, developing new processes for more accessible generic drugs. Her dream had always been to do science that helped people. "I do not want to work just for money, Mom. I want my work to mean something," and it meant something. In 2 years, she was already a project leader. She published 3 articles in international scientific journals. She traveled to conferences in Europe and the United States. She was independent, successful, happy. She lived alone in a small but cozy apartment in the city. On weekends, she went running in the park. She went out with her friends from university. She visited exhibitions and museums. And every Sunday, without fail, she came home for Dad's roast. That was our untouchable tradition. Until she met Mark. It was at an industrial engineering conference 5 years ago. He worked at a consulting firm presenting a project on process optimization. Ariana was there representing her pharmaceutical company. "Mommy." I met someone, she told me that afternoon on the phone, with an emotion in her voice I had not heard before. My heart skipped a beat, not of joy, but of that feeling every mother has when her daughter is growing up, when she is about to share her life with someone else. "Tell me." His name is Mark. He is an industrial engineer. He is smart, funny, and has incredible eyes. We talked for 3 hours after the conference. 3 hours, Mom. I did not even notice the time. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to feel that pure joy a mother should feel when her daughter falls in love for the first time. But something inside me stirred, a silent alarm that at that moment I did not know how to interpret. "When are we going to meet him soon?" "Very soon. I want Dad and you to meet him." 3 weeks later, Mark came to dinner at the house. He arrived on time, with a bottle of expensive wine and flowers for me, well-dressed, well-groomed, with that perfect smile I mentioned before. Too perfect. "Mrs. Vance, it is an honor to meet you. Ariana has told me so much about you and your work. I deeply admire what you do for women victims of violence. The right words, the right tone, the right posture." Robert shook his hand. They talked about architecture and engineering, about projects and professional perspectives. My husband seemed comfortable with him, but I watched him. I watched how he subtly interrupted Ariana when she spoke. I watched how his smile did not quite reach his eyes. I watched how, when Ariana mentioned a recent professional achievement, he quickly changed the subject to his own successes. Small details, insignificant to any normal person. But I had spent 30 years seeing patterns, and I recognized the warning signs. That night, when Mark and Ariana left, Robert found me in the kitchen washing dishes in silence. "What is wrong, love?" he asked me, knowing my silence better than anyone. "I do not know. Something does not add up. Give him time. It is the first time you see Ariana in love. It is natural to worry." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was projecting my work cases onto my personal life. Maybe I was being overprotective, but my instinct was screaming. The months followed. Ariana and Mark became inseparable. She started talking less about her work and more about him. She stopped going to the gym because Mark preferred they spend that time together. She stopped going out with her friends on Fridays because he wanted it to be their special night. "Mommy, I am happy, really happy. I wanted to believe her. God knows I wanted to believe her." Then we met Helen. It was 6 months later at a family lunch Mark organized. His mother had just moved to the city, according to what she told us, to be closer to her son. "He is all I have since my husband died," she explained with that sweet voice I later learned to detest. Helen was different from anyone I had met. elegant in appearance, but with an energy that occupied the entire space. She talked nonstop, always directing the conversation towards Mark, towards how wonderful he was, towards how much she had suffered to raise him alone after her husband's death. It was a terrible accident, she said with dramatically moist eyes. He fell down the stairs. I never got over that loss. But her body language did not match her words. There was no real pain in her expression, only performance. And the way she looked at Ariana, like evaluating, like measuring, like deciding if my daughter was good enough for her son. After that lunch, Robert and I talked until dawn. That woman gives me a bad vibe, I said. Me too. But Elena Ariana is an adult. We cannot. I know, but something is wrong. I can feel it. Robert hugged me that night as he had done thousands of times in our marriage. If something is wrong, Ariana will see it. We raised her to be smart, to be strong. Let's trust her. And I trusted. That was my mistake. A year later, Mark proposed to Ariana, an elaborate proposal at a lake house with rose petals and violinists. She said yes, crying with happiness. When she told us, I hugged my daughter and told her I was happy for her, and part of me was. The other part, the experienced lawyer, was screaming in silence. The wedding was beautiful. 200 guests in a garden in wine country. Ariana was radiant in her white dress. Like all brides, Robert walked her down the aisle. I remember he looked at me before giving her away, and in his eyes I saw the same worry I felt. But it was too late. We had already said yes. We had already given our blessing. The first months of marriage seemed normal. Ariana kept coming home on Sundays, although now with Mark. We kept making roast. Although conversations no longer flowed with the same naturalness, Mark always had an opinion on everything. He always corrected some detail of Ariana's stories. He always diverted attention to himself. And Ariana started talking less. Then, Robert died. It was sudden. A massive heart attack while he slept. He went in peace, without pain, but he went too soon. 62 years old. We still had so many years ahead, so many more Sundays of roast, so many stories to create, so many grandchildren to meet. But he was gone. And with him went the balance of our family. The funeral was a whirlwind of pain. Ariana cried in my arms like she hadn't cried since she was a child. Mark was there, correct and appropriate, but distant, as if fulfilling a social duty rather than comforting his wife. Helen, for her part, spent the entire funeral comparing Robert's death to her own husband's death. I know exactly how you feel, Elena. I also lost the love of my life. Although I must say, my loss was more traumatic because it was violent. Even in my pain, I recognized the manipulation. But I was too broken to confront it. The weeks after the funeral were the darkest of my life. The house felt empty, full of ghosts of a life that no longer existed. Robert's coffee mug still on the kitchen counter, his robe hanging in the bathroom, his architecture books in the study. Ariana came every day. She stayed with me. She made me food I could not eat. She forced me to shower, to get out of bed. Mom, you have to keep going. Dad would want you to keep going. And she was right, but going on without Robert was like breathing without air. It was during those months that Mark began to change. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe he showed who he had always been. He started suggesting that Ariana shouldn't come to visit me so much. Your mother is fine. She has to learn to be independent. He started criticizing her work, her clothes, her schedule. Why do you get home so late from the office? What are you really doing? And Ariana, devastated by the loss of her father, vulnerable and seeking stability, began to give in. She stopped coming so often. She stopped telling me so much. She stopped being the woman she had been. I noticed it in phone calls, in how her voice had lost that brightness, in how she always spoke in whispers, as if someone were listening. Honey, are you okay? Yes, Mom. I'm just tired from work. The same answer, over and over again. And I sunk in my own grief. I did not insist enough. Another mistake I carry. 6 months after Robert's death, the inheritance arrived. Robert had been a successful architect. He had invested well. He had saved thinking about our future. He left Ariana and me a considerable amount. I gave Ariana her full half, without restrictions, almost $500,000. Mom, this is too much. You should keep more. No, my love. Your father wanted you to have security. He wanted you to be able to follow your dreams without financial worries. With that money, Ariana and Mark bought the house in the hills, a beautiful residence, which should have been a home full of love. But it became a prison. Visits became more spaced out. Ariana always had an excuse: work, renovations, commitments with Mark's family. When I saw her, I noticed subtle changes. Her hair shorter, her clothes more conservative, her makeup heavier. Mom, I like this new style, but in her eyes there was something I had never seen before: fear. And I, blinded by my own pain, by my own grief, I did not recognize it until that night, that damn night of March 20th, the night that changed everything. The night I finally opened my eyes and saw what had been happening under my nose for 2 years. My daughter was not okay. My daughter had not been okay for a long time, and I had been too lost in my own sadness to realize. But that night, when I saw those 3 blows, when I heard that applause, when I felt my blood freeze, that night I recovered my purpose. That night I remembered who I was: Elena Vance, lawyer, fighter, mother, and nobody, absolutely nobody, was going to touch my daughter without consequences. As I tell all this, I think about where you might be listening to me. Write the name of your city in the comments. The first fracture was not a blow. It was something much more subtle, much more dangerous. It was a word. Let me explain. After that night of March 20th, when Mark and Helen were arrested, Ariana stayed with me at my house. I did not want her to go back to that residence in the hills. Not that night. I needed to have her close, make sure she was safe. I took her to her old room, the one we had kept exactly as she left it when she moved out. Her single bed with the sky blue quilt she herself had chosen at 15. Her diplomas and awards still hanging on the wall. The photograph of her with Robert at her graduation on the desk. "Mom, I haven't slept here in so long," she said with a voice so small it broke my heart. I helped her change. I gave her one of my clean pajamas. I made her chamomile tea with honey like I did when she was a child and could not sleep. We sat on her bed, like so many nights of her childhood. "Tell me everything," I said softly. "From the beginning. I need to know when it started." Ariana remained silent for a long time. She stared at her cup of tea, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember our honeymoon in Greece?" Of course I remembered. It had been 3 years ago. Ariana came back with hundreds of photographs. The impossible blue sea of Santorini, the ruins of Athens, the sunsets in Mykonos. In all the photos, she was smiling. She looked radiant. She looked happy. On the last night in Santorini, Ariana continued. We were having dinner at that restaurant overlooking the sea. "Do you remember I sent you that photo?" I nodded. I remembered it perfectly. Ariana in a white dress, the sun setting behind her, her smile wide and genuine. We had drunk wine. We were celebrating. A waiter approached our table, a young guy, Greek, very kind. He asked me in English if everything was okay with the food. I told him yes, that everything was delicious. We talked for maybe 30 seconds. Ariana took a sip of her tea. Her hands trembled slightly. When the waiter left, Mark stayed quiet. I thought he was enjoying the view, the moment. But when I looked at him, he had that expression I later learned to fear. And what expression? Cold, distant, as if suddenly I was a stranger. What happened? We finished dinner in silence. We went back to the hotel. I thought he would get over it, that maybe it had been the wine or the tiredness of the trip. But when we got to the room, he closed the door and looked me directly in the eyes. Ariana paused, took a deep breath. I continued waiting, giving her the space she needed. He called me, a flirt, one single word, but the way Ariana pronounced it, with that weight, with that contained pain, made me understand that it had not been just a word. It had been a sentence. I asked him what he meant. He told me he had seen how I smiled at the waiter. how I prolonged the conversation unnecessarily, how clearly I was seeking his attention. Ariana, I told him he was crazy, that I had just been polite. That is how I am with everyone. And then he laughed. He laughed, Mom. But it was not a normal laugh. It was a condescending laugh, as if I were a silly girl who did not understand the world. What did he tell you? He told me that maybe I did not realize what I was doing, that maybe I was naturally such a flirt that I did not even notice, that his mother had warned him that women too independent like me sometimes did not know how to behave appropriately in a marriage. I felt the rage rise up my throat, but I held it back. I needed to hear everything. I spent the rest of the night apologizing, Mom, apologizing for something I had not done, because he made me feel that maybe I had done something wrong without realizing, that maybe I had been inappropriate, that maybe I needed to be more aware of how my actions could be misinterpreted. That was the first fracture. I did not realize at that moment. I thought it was a misunderstanding. I thought he was being sensitive because it was our honeymoon and he wanted everything to be perfect. Ariana wiped a tear that had started to fall. But the next day, at the airport on the way back, he bought flowers, red roses. He hugged me and told me he was sorry, that he had overreacted, that it was because he loved me so much that the idea of losing me made him irrational. The classic cycle: explosion, honeymoon, tense calm, explosion. I had seen it hundreds of times in my cases, and now I was seeing it in my own daughter. When was the next time 2 months later? We went to a work meeting for my company. It was a celebration. We had closed an important contract. My boss, Dr. Roberts, congratulated me publicly. He hugged me, a professional hug, appropriate, of those you give in work contexts. Mark claimed you did it. That night he yelled at me for the first time. He said I had humiliated him, that everyone at that party had seen how I allowed my boss to touch me, that clearly I had no respect for our marriage. I explained that he was my boss, that it had been a professional hug, that there were 50 other people there. But he did not listen. He kept yelling. He called me naive. He called me stupid. He told me that obviously my boss wanted something else and that I was too stupid to realize. Ariana leaned back against the headboard of her bed. Exhausted from recounting memories she had clearly been keeping for a long time. I started being afraid to go out, afraid to talk to coworkers, afraid to smile too much, afraid to wear clothes he considered provocative. I started constantly measuring myself. Is this blouse appropriate? Is this conversation innocent? Can this smile be misinterpreted, daughter? That is psychological violence. It is control. I know, Mom. I know now. But at that moment, I just wanted things to go back to how they were at the beginning, when he was charming, when he made me feel special. I kept thinking that if I behaved correctly, if I was the perfect wife, he would go back to being that man I fell in love with. I recognized my own failure in that moment. All the times Ariana had canceled plans with me, all the times she had stopped coming on Sundays, all the times her voice sounded dull on the phone. I had thought it was the grief for Robert, that it was the natural adjustment of marriage, that it was busy adult life. But it had been this: systematic isolation, gradual control, invisible violence. When did the blows start? I asked, although part of me did not want to know the answer. Ariana closed her eyes. 8 months ago, a few days after we bought the house bought with her father's money, the money Robert had left for her to have security, freedom, options. The irony was cruel. I was excited about the house. I wanted to decorate it, make it ours. I hired an interior designer, a talented young guy who came recommended by a friend. His name was Sebastian. I already knew where the story was going. Sebastian came often, taking measurements, showing me color options, furniture. He was professional, always. But Mark didn't like it. He said he spent too much time in our house, that clearly he had intentions. I told him he was gay, Mom. Sebastian was openly gay. He was engaged to his partner. I showed him his Instagram profile where he was clearly seen with his boyfriend. But Mark didn't care. He said he could be bisexual, that he could be lying, that I was too trusting. He forbade me to continue working with Sebastian. I had to fire him. invent an excuse. Sebastian felt terrible. He thought he had done something inappropriate. I had to lie to him. And it was there when we had the worst argument up to that moment. I told him he was being irrational, that he had no right to control who I worked with, that was my house too, bought with my money. Ariana opened her eyes. They were red, swollen. He pushed me against the wall. He didn't hit me, not with a closed fist, but he pushed me so hard I hit my head against the plaster. I saw stars for a few seconds. I felt nauseous. He apologized immediately. He cried. He said he didn't know what had happened to him, that I had provoked him by mentioning my money when we were supposed to be a team, that he was under a lot of stress at work, that his mother was sick and he was worried. Ariana bought my forgiveness, Mom. Literally. The next day he arrived with a diamond necklace. He took me to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city. He told me he was going to change, that he was going to go to therapy, that he loved me more than anything in the world. Did he go to therapy? He went to 2 sessions. Then he said the therapist didn't understand him, that the therapist was on the side of women and that it wasn't fair. Of course not. Abusers never accept responsibility. They always find excuses. They always blame others. They always victimize themselves. The following months were a roller coaster. Some weeks he was the perfect man. He brought me flowers. He wrote me sweet messages. He treated me like a queen. Other weeks he was a stranger, cold, critical, controlling. And Helen, I said, where was Helen in all this? Ariana's face hardened. Helen made everything worse, Mom. She moved closer to us 6 months ago. She bought an apartment 3 blocks from our house. 3 blocks, 3 blocks. And she started coming every day, Mom. Sometimes without warning. She arrived with her keys, because Mark had given her a set, and entered as if it were her house. One day I arrived from work and found her reorganizing my kitchen, moving my things, throwing away spices that according to her were no longer good, changing plates around, I told her, with all possible politeness, that I appreciated her help, but that I preferred to organize my own kitchen. Do you know what she answered me? I shook my head. She told me, a good wife accepts her mother-in-law's advice. I raised Mark alone, working double shifts, sacrificing everything for him. The least you can do is let me help you be the wife he deserves. The wife he deserves, I repeated with bitterness. Helen had an opinion on everything. On my clothes, that skirt is too short. What will people think on my work? You should consider reducing hours. Men need their wives to be available. On my kitchen, my son's roast is too salty. Clearly you do not know the correct recipe. And Mark always defended her. Always. It didn't matter how unreasonable she was. He took her side. He told me his mother had suffered a lot, that she had raised a son alone, that I should be more understanding. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house, as if I were living in their house, not mine, as if I were a guest who had to earn the right to be there. Ariana got out of bed, walked to the window of her old room. She looked outside, towards the garden where Robert used to grow herbs for cooking. Do you know what is the worst part, Mom? What? That Helen talked to me about her marriage as if it were a role model. She told me how she educated her husband, how she put him in his place when he behaved badly, how she taught him that she was the one who ruled the house. I always thought those stories were strange. She talked about hitting him with objects when he got drunk, about hiding his money when he didn't behave well, about punishing him by locking him out of the house at night. A shiver ran down my back. And when she told me these stories, she laughed. She laughed, Mom, as if they were funny marriage anecdotes, not abuse. Do you think what if she killed her husband? I do not know. But every time she mentions it, there is something in her eyes, something cold, something that scares me. Ariana returned to bed, snuggled next to me. As when she was a child and had nightmares, the first real blow, the first with a closed fist, was 4 months ago. I waited. It was something so stupid, so ridiculously stupid, that I am ashamed to tell it. Tell me anyway. I was cooking, making dinner. Helen had come and had criticized everything, the cleaning, the food from the day before, my hair. I was tense, stressed, I chopped onions with the knife Robert had given me. That Japanese one I liked so much. I remembered that knife. Robert had bought it on a trip to Japan. He had paid a fortune for it because he knew how much Ariana liked cooking. Mark arrived from work in a bad mood. He started complaining that the house smelled too much like onion. I explained I was cooking. He told me I could have ventilated better. I told him the windows were open, and then, without any reason, without any real provocation, he told me, "You are useless. You cannot do even the simplest thing without ruining it." I turned to look at him, surprised, and he took that as a challenge. Ariana instinctively touched her jaw, as if the pain were still there. He hit me. A direct punch to the jaw. I fell to the floor. Dad's Japanese knife fell and dented against the tiles. Silent tears fell down my face. I couldn't contain them. I stayed there, on my kitchen floor, bleeding from the mouth, looking at Dad's broken knife, and the only thing I thought was, "Dad, I need you. I do not know what to do without you." I hugged her tighter. Helen was there. She had seen everything. Do you know what she did? What she knelt beside me and told me. Wives have to learn when to keep their mouth closed. I learned that lesson many years ago. Now it is your turn. After that. Mark locked himself in his study. Helen helped me clean the blood. She gave me ice for my jaw. She taught me how to cover the bruise. Yellow concealer first, then your skin tone, then powder. She explained with all the calm in the world, as if it were a normal beauty tutorial. I asked her if she had gone through this, if her husband had ever hit her. She looked me directly in the eyes and told me, "No, dear, I was smarter. I learned to control the situation before it escalated." The pieces began to fit in my head. Helen had not been a victim. Helen had been a perpetrator, and now she was raising a second generation of violence, with Mark as her tool. "Why did you not tell me?" I asked, although I knew the answer. "Because I was ashamed, Mom. Because all my life I saw you defending other women. Because you are strong, unbreakable, brave. How was I going to tell you that I, your daughter, had become exactly the kind of woman you rescue? Besides," she continued, "Mark always apologized afterwards. He always promised to change. He always convinced me that it had been my fault for provoking him. And part of me was still in love with the man I met 5 years ago. I kept waiting for that man to return. But he was not going to return. No, because that man never existed. It was a mask, and the mask fell off when I was already trapped." We remained silent for a long time. The clock in the living room struck 3 in the morning. "What is going to happen now?" Ariana finally asked. "Now," I said with a determination I hadn't felt in years. "Now we are going to make sure that Mark and Helen face the consequences of each of their actions. We are going to use every legal tool we have, and we are going to get your life back. What if he gets out? What if he looks for me? He is not going to get out, not if I can help it. And if he does, he is going to have a restraining order so solid that he won't even be able to think about you without breaking the law." Ariana finally smiled, a small smile, weak, but real. "I missed you, Mom. I missed this version of you. The warrior. I never left daughter. I was just asleep for a while. But I woke up. That night, the two of us fell asleep in her bed, hugging like when she was 5 years old, and storms scared her. But this time, the storm had already passed, or so we thought, because what we didn't know was that Mark and Helen were not going to give up so easily, and that the real battle was just beginning. I still wonder if I did the right thing calling the police that night, or if I should have planned more carefully. And you, what would you have done in my place? The days after the arrest were strange, strangely silent, strangely peaceful, as if the world had pressed pause. Ariana stayed with me at the house. We didn't talk much about going back to the house in the hills. Neither of us wanted to face that conversation yet. In the mornings, I made coffee just like Robert did. Ariana sat at the kitchen counter, wrapped in one of my robes, looking out the window towards the garden. Sometimes we talked, more frequently. We remained in a comfortable silence. That type of silence that only exists between people who know each other deeply. It was the fourth day after the arrest when the first call came. I was in my study, reviewing documents to prepare the formal case against Mark and Helen, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I usually do not answer unknown numbers, but something made me press the green button. Attorney Vance. It was a woman's voice, older, refined, with that tone of authority that comes from years of privilege. Yes, who is speaking? My name is Christine Davis. I am a close friend of Helen. Of course she was. How can I help you? Rather, I can help you. Attorney, I understand there was a misunderstanding between your daughter and my dear friend Mark. A misunderstanding. She called 3 blows to the face a misunderstanding. Mrs. Davis, with all due respect, there was no misunderstanding. There was an act of domestic violence that I witnessed directly and that is documented by the authorities. Oh, attorney, please. You are a woman of the world. You know how young marriages are. There are fights. There are tensions. That does not mean you should destroy the life of a successful man for a moment of what. I interrupted her. My voice sounded colder than I intended. A moment of what exactly? Silence on the other end. What she tried to say continued with a more cautious tone. It is just that Helen has told me a lot about her son. He is a good man, hardworking, devoted. And your daughter, well, Helen mentions that Ariana can be somewhat challenging. There it was. The narrative I knew was coming. The victim provoked the abuser. The victim deserved it. The victim is the real problem. Mrs. Davis, I am going to be very clear. I have no interest in discussing my daughter's character with you or anyone else. My daughter was a victim of violence, period, and both Mark and Helen are going to face the full legal consequences of their actions. That would be very unfortunate, she said. And now her voice had a threatening nuance. Mark comes from a very well-connected family. His uncle is a magistrate in the Superior Court. His cousin works in the Attorney General's office. It would be a shame if this matter became complicated for you and your legal practice. A veiled threat. How predictable. Mrs. Davis, I have been in this profession for 32 years. I have faced threats from narcos, from corrupt politicians, from powerful businessmen. If you think I am going to back down because Mark's uncle is a magistrate, you clearly do not know who you are talking to. Besides, I continued, every word of this conversation is being recorded, as is my legal right. And any attempt at intimidation or interference with an active case constitutes obstruction of justice. Do you wish to continue? She hung up immediately. I sighed and saved the recording in 3 different locations: my phone, my computer, and the cloud. 32 years had taught me to document absolutely everything. Ariana appeared in the study doorway. Who was it? I told her about the call. I saw her face pale. Mom. Christine Davis is one of the most influential women in the neighborhood. If she is on Helen's side, it does not matter whose side she is on. Justice does not work by social connections. But even as I said those words, I knew they were not completely true. Justice should work like that. But in reality, connections mattered. Power mattered. Money mattered. And Mark, apparently, had more connections than I had anticipated. The second call came that same afternoon. This time it was my assistant at the firm. Lucy. She sounded nervous. Attorney, I need to tell you something. A man arrived an hour ago. He said he was Mark's lawyer. He left this. She sent me a photo by WhatsApp. It was a lawsuit. A lawsuit for defamation, false accusation, and moral damages. Against me. Against Ariana. They were asking for $2 million in compensation. He also left something else. Lucy continued, a temporary court order suspending the restraining order against Mr. Mark, signed by Magistrate Henry, his uncle. Of course, how is it possible? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Favors, calls between friends, the system working for whoever had the right connections. It is not legal, I said. I am going to appeal immediately. Lucy, yes. Contact Magistrate Hernandez. She owes me a favor. I need her to review this case personally. I will do it." I hung up and stared at the lawsuit on my phone. $2 million, an amount designed to intimidate, to scare, to make people give up. But I was not people. Ariana entered the study again. She had heard part of the conversation. "Mom, this is getting out of control. Maybe we should what?" I looked directly at her, "back down. Let him get away with it. Allow him to continue hitting you because he has a magistrate uncle." "No." "But $2 million, Mom. That could ruin us." They are not going to win that lawsuit. It is an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. But I saw the fear in Ariana's eyes, and for the first time I saw something else. Doubt. "Daughter, look at me." She did, although with effort. "Are you thinking about going back to him?" Silence. "Ariana, answer me." "I do not know," she whispered. "I do not know, Mom. All this is too much. The calls, the lawsuits, the threats. And Mark has been writing to me." My blood froze for the second time that week. What he writes to me from his lawyer's phone, long messages. He says he is sorry, that he is in therapy, that he finally understood what he did wrong, that Helen is also receiving psychological help, that if I give him one more chance, he is going to prove he can change. "Ariana, I know what you are going to say. I know it is manipulation. I know he is probably lying. But Mom..." Her eyes filled with tears. "What if this time it is true? What if he really is going to change? We were married 3 years. That has to mean something." I got up from my desk and took my daughter's hands in mine. "Do you know how many times I have heard that same story? How many women have sat exactly where you are now, saying exactly the same words? But they are not me. You are right. They are not. Because many of them did not have the luck to have someone to help them get out. Many of them went back." "And do you know what happened?" Ariana shook her head. "But I think she already knew the answer. Some are in hospitals, some are in wheelchairs, some are in cemeteries. Mark would not kill me. That is exactly what all of them thought." We remained silent. I could see the internal battle on my daughter's face, the rational part fighting against the emotional part, the part that knew the truth against the part that still wanted to believe in the fairy tale. "Let me show you something," I said. I took her to my home office, opened my computer and showed her statistics, cold, hard, undeniable numbers. 70% of women who return to their abuser after the first serious incident suffer more severe violence. 43% end up in the hospital within the first year. And look at this number. I pointed to a figure in red on the screen. 1-200 women died last year from partner violence. 1-200. Each of them believed their partner was going to change. Each of them thought it was different. Ariana looked at the screen with glassy eyes. "But I also have other numbers." I continued. Women who got out, women who reported, women who rebuilt their lives. 87% report better quality of life 2 years later. 93% say it was the best decision of their life. And the other 7%, some cases went back before we could help them completely. Some faced economic difficulties, but none. Ariana died. My daughter let herself fall onto the sofa in my office. "You just do not understand, Mom. It is not just physical fear. It is everything. The house we bought together, the plans we had, the friends we made as a couple, the family we were going to build. If I leave him, I lose all that." "No," I said firmly. "If you leave him, you gain your life. Everything else is replaceable. Your life is not." But I feel so guilty, as if I were exaggerating, as if 3 blows were not enough reason to destroy a marriage. And there it was. The denial, the minimization, the syndrome I had seen in hundreds of cases. "Ariana, look at me well. 3 blows. That is 3 blows too many. There is no acceptable number of times someone can hit you. 0 is the correct number. 0. But what will people think? My friends, my colleagues, his family. Do you care more about what strangers think than your own safety? It is not that. It is just that it is complicated. No daughter. It is simple. He hit you. He is the guilty one. You are the victim. There are no nuances there. Ariana stayed quiet for a long moment. Can I at least read the messages? Can I at least hear what he has to say? Every fiber of my being wanted to say no, wanted to forbid her to have any contact with Mark. But I also knew that if I pressured her too much, I could push her away. Okay, I said carefully, but with conditions. 1. I read the messages with you. 2. You do not respond without consulting me first. 3. We document everything in case we need to use it legally. Deal. She nodded. That night, sitting in her room. Ariana opened her phone and showed me the messages. There were dozens, all from different numbers. The first said, Ariana, my love, you do not know how sorry I am. I am destroyed. These days in custody have given me time to think, to really see what I did. I was a monster to you. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I ask for it anyway. Please, give me a chance to show you I can change. I love you more than my own life. Classic. Self-flagellation followed by declaration of love. The second. I spoke to a psychologist here. He diagnosed me with impulse control disorder related to childhood trauma. I finally understand where my violence comes from. My mother. She hurt me a lot when I was a child. I know it is not an excuse, but it is an explanation. I am working on that. For you. For us. Now blaming his mother. Interesting twist, considering Helen had applauded when he hit Ariana. The third. I saw my lawyer filed a lawsuit against you and your mom. Please. Believe me, I did not want that. It was my family's decision. I just want to resolve this in private, as a couple. Tell them to withdraw the lawsuit. Just give me the chance to talk to you. Face to face, without lawyers, without your mom interfering. There was the real objective. Isolate her from me. Talk in private, where he could manipulate her without witnesses. Do you see the pattern I asked Ariana? Which one first message? He victimizes himself. Second, he blames others for his behavior. Third, he tries to separate you from your support system. This is the manipulator's manual. Chapter 1. But Mom, what if he really is getting help? What if he really wants to change? If he really wanted to change, he would respect the legal process. He would respect your space. He would not be pressuring you to talk in private. He would not be using lawyers to intimidate us while writing you love messages. Ariana knew I was right. I could see it on her face, but I could also see that part of her still wanted to believe in the fantasy. The following days were difficult. Ariana oscillated between moments of clarity and moments of doubt. Some days she was furious with Mark, determined to move forward. Other days she stared at her phone for hours, rereading messages, questioning every decision. I tried to give her space while keeping her safe. It was a delicate balance. One afternoon I found her in the garden, standing in front of the small herb garden Robert had cultivated. The rosemary had grown wild. The thyme had spread all over the flower bed. The mint threatened to invade everything. Dad hated seeing the plants neglected. She said without turning around. I stood beside her. Your father would want you alive and safe. That is all that would matter to him. Sometimes I wish he were still here. He always knew what to say, always knew how to make everything seem simple. Your father was wise, but even he would have struggled with this, not because he didn't know the right answer, but because you were his daughter. And when you love someone, you want them to make their own decisions, even when you know they might be the wrong ones. Ariana turned to look at me. Do you think I am making the wrong decision by doubting I think it is natural to doubt? You were with him 3 years. You built a life with him. You cannot just turn off those feelings like a switch. But what I ask is that you do not confuse the love you felt for him with the danger he represents now. What is the difference? True love makes you feel safe. True love lifts you up. It does not destroy you. What Mark offered you was not love. It was control disguised as love. Ariana nodded slowly. Do you know what is the hardest part? She asked. What accepting that I spent 3 years in love with a lie, that the man I met never existed, that everything was an act designed to trap me. It was not your fault. Daughter, I know in my head, but my heart still does not accept it. I hugged her there, between the overgrown rosemary and the invasive thyme, under the same sky Robert used to look at while cooking roast on Sundays. "It is going to hurt for a while," I told her, "but the pain means you are healing. It means you are alive." That night, Ariana finally blocked all the numbers Mark had written to her from. It was not easy. She cried while doing it. But she did it. "I am ready," she said. "I am ready to fight. Then we are going to fight." And so we did. The next day, I counterattacked legally. I filed a formal appeal against the suspension of the restraining order. I documented every threat, every call, every message. I contacted Magistrate Hernandez, who reviewed the case and confirmed that her colleague's order had been inappropriate. The restraining order was reinstated, with even stricter terms. Mark could not get within 500 meters of Ariana. He could not contact her directly or indirectly. He could not send third parties to talk to her. Any violation would mean immediate arrest. As I tell all this, I think about where you might be listening to me. Write the name of your city in the comments. I also filed a countersuit for aggravated domestic violence, threats, and psychological damage. I asked not for $2, but for $8 million in compensation for Ariana. Not because we needed the money, but to send a message. They were not going to intimidate us. They were not going to scare us. They were not going to beat us. But while I fought in the courts, Mark and Helen fought on another battlefield, one I did not anticipate, one that almost destroyed us. The social war began 3 weeks after the arrest. It was subtle at first, so subtle I almost didn't notice. Ariana had started going out of the house more. Small steps. She went to the supermarket. She went to her beauty salon. She was trying to recover some normality while we waited for court hearings. She returned from the salon one afternoon with a pale face. "What happened?" I asked immediately. "Olga," she said. Olga was her stylist for 5 years, a cheerful woman who always had stories to tell. Olga behaved strangely, cold, distant. She barely spoke to me during the entire cut. Maybe she was having a bad day. No, Mom, it was more than that. When I was paying, another client I know, Fern, arrived. We have seen each other there dozens of times. We always say hello. But today she saw me and literally turned around. She pretended she was looking for something in her purse until I left. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. "Did you say something? Did you ask?" I asked Olga if I had done something wrong. She just shook her head and told me she was in a hurry because her next appointment was about to arrive. But Mom, her schedule was empty. I saw it the next day. Ariana received a message from her best friend from university, Patty, or who had been her best friend. The message said, "Ariana,